Welcome back. In this video, we will explore some of the most commonly used input components in Gradio. The slider, checkbox, radio button, and dropdown. These components help us capture user input in a clean and interactive way. Let's get started. The first up which we have is slider, where this is a perfect when you want to user to pick a number from a defined range, like adjusting a threshold or a volume or a temperature. How do we use it? Here is a simple example for it. Gr dot, I'll be using slider is a inbuilt method, and I have a provision where I can pass multiple parameter. The first parameter is label. So label, in this example, I'm going to set it as pick a number, and then the second parameter which I'm going to define it as a minimum and maximum. This is a range value which is going to set what is your minimum beginning value and what is your maximum end value. So my second parameter is minimum. In this case, I will set my minimum value as 0 and then my maximum value as 100. And then I have another parameter which I can pass, which is a step. This is going to define is how many number of times the slider moves in steps. So the slider moves in the steps of 1. So I'll set the value to 1 in this case, and you can define if you want to set the steps to 2, you can also define. It's again based on the user's requirement. And if you want to set a default value for your slider, then I have something called as a value. So in this case, I'm going to set my default value as 0. So the next component which I'll be explaining is a checkbox, where a checkbox is used for true or false or yes or no decision. Think of it like a switch to turn off or on. So to give an example, I'll use gr dot checkbox is an inbuilt method what I have. Again, checkbox method also has some of the parameter. In this case, the first parameter is label, and I'll pass the label as enable dark mode, and based on the requirement you can pass whatever the string that you would like to pass it on. And then I have another parameter called as a value. In this case, I will set the value default value as false. That means this checkbox is enabled with enable dark mode and it's unchecked by default, and you can set the default to true if you want it pre-enabled. In this case, I have made the default value as a false. That means the checkbox is by default unchecked, and if you want this to be pre-enabled, then this value you can reset to true. So let's move on to the next component. The next component is a radio button, where radio button lets the user choose one of the option from a list of predefined choices. Great for simple and mutually exclusive selection. To give an example, I'll use gr dot, then the method which I'm going to use is radio, and then I'll pass some of the parameters. So label is first parameter, and then I'm going to use choose your favorite fruit. So this is my label. And then the second parameter is I would like to pick one among them. As a parameter, I'll be using something called as a choices. So choices is equals to, here I will define what are my choices. So my first choice would be apple, which is always enclosed. Every choice is enclosed within the double quotes. And the second choice would be banana. Again, it has to be enclosed within the double quotes. And then the third choice which I would like to give it as a cherry. So this is my third choice, and once it has been done, close it, and then I have to set a default value if it is required. Again, I'm going to make use of another parameter called as a value. So value is equals to apple. So this is the default radio button which is going to get selected, and then we are going to close this. And the fourth one which I would be explaining is about the drop down. Dropdown is another input component which can be used in the Gradio while creating a graphical user interface. So this is similar to the radio button but more compact, ideal when you have a longer list of options or want a cleaner user interface. So how do we create this? So I'll be using gr.dropdown, and then I have to pass the argument. The first argument which I'll be passing is label, and then I'll give a label as select the language. Label is also enclosed within the double quotes, and then provide the choices like how we did for the radio button. And my first choice would be Kannada. That's my first choice. And every choice is enclosed within the double quotes. The second one is English. And the third one is Hindi. These are the list of elements which will be appeared on the drop down menu. And then you can also set the value here, a default value, like how we did for a radio button. So I'll be using value is equals to Kannada. So that will be my default value when if I see a graphical user interface, and I'm going to close this. So this drop down lets user to select a language, and a default language which it is going to display is Kannada, and you can even enable multi-selection if needed by setting the multi-select. There you can also pass one more parameter called as a multi-select, and you can set that multi-select as a true. So what we will do is, let's combine all of these components into a single interface and create a simple Gradio program and see what is our output. So I have already created. Let me walk through those program and we will see what is the output of it. And here we have an example, but before that, let me clear all these things. And then so here is the program. What I have did, as like previous examples, I have imported a Gradio and I have created a alias name for it. So gr is the alias name for the Gradio. And now I have created a user defined function, and the name of the function is the summary, and I have passed four different parameters. One is the number, which is going to accept the number from the slider. The second one is enabled is my second parameter as a part of the summary, which is going to accept the input from the checkbox. And the fourth one, the third parameter is the fruit, which is going to expect the input from the radio. And the last parameter is the language, which is going to get the input from the drop down. So what I have to return once I received all these values, I have to display these numbers and whether it is enabled or disabled, and what is the name of the fruit, and what is the language which I have selected as my output, which is in terms of a text. So I'll be using something called as a return statement and f string, which is going to wrap up by displaying all these values. So now you can see that I have created an interface and have stored that interface in a variable called as a demo, and then I will invoke my function. I'll pass my first argument in the interface, which is function, and the name of the function is summary. So summary gets wrapped for the execution by accepting four different parameters as I explained earlier. And now I have four different input components which I have created. So in the parameters called as an inputs, I have created four different functions. The first function is the slider, and I have four different parameters. I have given a name to my slider as pick a number, and I have set the minimum value to 0 and the maximum value to 10, and how many number of steps that I have to move from 0 to 10 is being defined with 1. And then I have a checkbox where my checkbox is being labeled with by. And then the third input which I have created is the radio button. The label is choose a fruit. I have to choose one among the choices whatever that I have given. Here the second parameter with respect to the radio is the choices, where I have given three different fruit name. apple, banana, and cherry. So once I see a radio button, I'll be able to select one among them. And the third one which I have is the drop down, where the first parameter is the label, and I have given a name to a label as to select the language based on the choices. So here my choices is English, Kannada, and Hindi. So all these inputs are being accepted from slider, checkbox, radio, and drop down, and it is being given as an input to my user defined function. And finally, we know that I have to use a method called as a launch to run my Gradio. So I have already executed it, but anyway, I'm going to just press shift and enter to see what is my output. So it takes a bit of time to execute your program. So it's getting loaded here. And now you can see this is a slider. So as I move this slider value, you can also see that the slider value is getting changed here. So this is a slider example for a slider. Then I have created a checkbox, and this checkbox is going to, you have an option whether you can enable or disable. By default, it is being set to false. That is why this was not selected. If you want to by default you want to make it pre-enabled, then you can make the value as true, but here in this case it is false. That is why it is been disabled. I can click and select this, and now you can see the radio button where you can choose any one among them. So in this case I'll choose Apple, and then you can see a drop down box available, and where the name, the label which is being given to this is a select language. So if I just click on this, I can see three different options. By default I have set it as English, so that's why you are able to see it, and I can choose any one among them. So I'm going to choose Kannada here. Once I submit, you can see all the parameters whatever that we have selected as a display is being displayed as an output. Let me click here. If I click, so now you can see the slider value whatever that is been accepted as 7, and then since I have enabled it, so the value is set to true. I have selected the apple, so that is why you can see the name of the fruit as apple, and I have selected the language as Kannada, so now that's how you can see the Kannada, right? And that's a wrap on understanding all these input components, that is slider, checkbox, radio button, and drop down components in Gradio. With just few lines of code, you can create a powerful and interactive user interface. So with another input components, I'll come back again with a new video. Thank you.